Have you been experiencing an uneasy feeling about the modern church? Do you sense that there is something very wrong within the body of believers? Have you found yourself questioning the things that you've been taught about Scripture? Are you bothered by a nagging sense that much of what you were taught is lacking or worse, wrong? Do you feel lost? Are you looking for more? If you've been experiencing any of these feelings, you are among friends here. We felt the same way at one time. We can relate to the prophet Jeremiah when he wrote, "Our fathers have inherited nothing but lies, worthless things in which there is no profit." This is Jeremiah 16:19. We, too, felt lost until we started tearing down the teachings and traditions of man and started to study Scripture for ourselves. And in its original, ancient Near East, Torah-observant Hebrew context. When we started to study Scripture in its ancient context, our faith started to change. We came alive, and we found ourselves drawn back to the ancient paths. This is what Yahweh says: stand by the ways and seek and ask for ancient paths, where the good way is, and walk in it. Then you will find a resting place for your souls. But they said, we will not walk in it. This is Jeremiah 6:16. The Scriptures call this ancient path the way. This show is dedicated to serving the kingdom of Yahweh by sharing what we have learned about the way with others. We are aware that there are many other voices out there making similar claims. We just feel that many of those voices are seeking something other than to serve the kingdom, and that they do nothing but cause more confusion as a result. We make no claim to special revelation or anointing. We just try to avoid adding to the confusion by focusing on the Father, His Son, and their kingdom. We are lay people, but we are not without the necessary skills to do proper research. We do believe that Torah still applies to the believer, but we are not part of the Hebrew Roots movement. In fact, most Hebrew Roots groups would reject us. This is because we recognize that Torah is more than just the law of Moses. We are under the new covenant, and with a change in the covenant, there was a change in the way Torah applies to the believers. Search the Scriptures and pray for the wisdom necessary to better understand how the covenant has changed and how these changes govern the way Torah is to be applied to the life of the believer. Then, we try to live, as best we can in our modern world, according to these changes described and lived out by the Messiah and his apostles. And in everything we do, we strive to serve the Father, His Son, and their kingdom by serving other believers and helping to make stronger disciples as we go. Good morning. Welcome to We Who Are Lost. It is going to be Wednesday, October 22nd, 2025 today. We are in the second part of our series on what exactly is the new covenant and what are our obligations to the law, quote unquote law, under the new covenant. Last week we went over a bunch of different words that are in your Hebrew and Greek that are normally translated as law or the law or ordinance or regulation or commandment. And that was all our definition work that we were doing. This week, we're going to go over a little bit more in-depth look at covenants, what they are, how they work, and the history of the word and the teaching and the understanding of it. This is going to be important to us. Next week, we're going to go over, we're going to go over the law today. Next week, we're going to go over covenants. I'm sorry, I'm thinking too far ahead. We're going to go over covenants. And then 2 weeks from today, we're going to go over covenant theology versus dispensationalism. Very important to get this out of the way before we start looking specifically at the new covenant. And then on 3 weeks from now, which will be the fifth and final show in this series, we're going to look at exactly what we Who Are Lost believe we're responsible for under the new covenant. Who is it addressed to? What type of covenant is it? What are the terms and conditions under that covenant? And how do we apply them? This is a subject that has bothered me for a while, namely because I've realized that as I come to understand that Torah still applies to the new covenant believer, I originally was under the mistaken impression that that meant law of Moses. I've studied it. in depth. I'm still studying it. I'm going by the numbers this time in this teaching. It is by the numbers, which means stupid simple. It's not meant to be insulting. It's just meant to make sure I stay very clear in my thinking, one careful step at a time, and teach others the same way. This is a book report. I'm showing you what I've found. And I'm going to give you an example. There is a very prominent Hebrew Roots movement website out there. Huge audience. They teach you that there is no difference between an ordinance or a cultic law or rituals, cultic rituals. By cultic, we don't mean like a cult of, the Moonies or something. We're talking about like the regulations dealing with the priests in the temple and stuff. And they'll say that's law just as much as the 10 Commandments are. This is incorrect. I can prove it with one simple thing here. If the law of Moses still applies to the New Covenant believer, then the Bible commands us to allow the human race to die out, or at least our faith to die out. Joe, that's crazy. How'd you get there? Very simple. We are now under the order of Melchizedek. It says so in the New Covenant, in the New Testament, in the book of Hebrews. Melchizedek makes every man, every household member, head of the household, makes him a priest. Well, a priest has to stay clean in order to serve the temple. The temple is the body. Your wife has to purify herself after every menstrual cycle. There's no way for her to do that anymore. The temple and the Levites are gone. She cannot purify herself according to the law of Moses. Therefore, you can never touch her again, have marital relations. Therefore, there'll be no more children. Therefore, according to the law of Moses, according to the way this website teaches, the law of Moses dictates that under the New Covenant, humanity must allow itself to die out. That contradicts one of the very first commandments given to us by Yahweh in the book of Genesis. Be fruitful and multiply and fill the land. There are many such contradictions created by insisting that the law of Moses still applies to a New Covenant believer. And we will get to those as we go on here. But this is one of the ways I know as a fact that this very well-known, very respected Hebrew Roots webpage is wrong. Because the logical extension of the scriptures tells me it has to be wrong. Must be. But the Messiah said that Torah still applies to us. Not one jot or tittle of the Torah will disappear. Not law of Moses, Torah. Now, if you watched last week, you know that in the Greek, the only word they have for this is nomos. It means law in the English language. But there is no Greek equivalent of Torah. Instruction. I guess they could find a word for instruction, but they don't use it that way. Why? That's human bias creeping into our definitions and translations. This is the teachings and traditions of man creeping into our translation. This is one of the reasons that we need to learn to use our interlinear Bible. And this is the primary point that I wish to make today. If I do nothing else than convince you that your Greek translation of law, the Greek word nomos, if you look it up, is sometimes used for Torah, then I will have succeeded. That and a greater understanding of what Torah is. So we're going to start, if you go to your homework, WeWhoAreLost.com, I apologize for that. The blog page right here, you're going to see that there's your homework. It's linked to you in the Rumble listing. We went over, here's your words. Those are the Greek words. These are a couple passages in the Old Testament that show you the different Hebrew words that we translate as law, commandment, etc., etc. This is the definition of all those words. We're going to be in part 2 today. We're going to start right here. What is Torah? What does Torah mean? This right here is from a Hebrew Roots source. This right here is from My Jewish Learning. And this right here is from Chabad, which is another Jewish, Orthodox Jewish site. And then we'll cover these two things here in a minute. And these are different law systems in the Old Testament. We'll get to that. But for today, right now, this is where we're going to start. This is from Jeff A. Benner. He's a prominent Hebrew roots teacher. Be very careful with him. He has a tendency to run with the information he finds harder and farther than the information warrants. And as Charlie will tell you, his Hebrew is not always the strongest. But in this case, I think it's acceptable. If I'm not mistaken, I've asked Charlie to read over this in the past. I don't know. But for today, this seems like it fits with what the other sources I found tell me. So I want to go over this. I'm actually going to read this. It's only about 2 pages long. I want to read this to you because this helps. And then we're going to read the My Jewish Learning page or sections of it. Jeff A. Benner says, the Hebrew word Torah, which is Strong's word number 8451, is usually translated into the English word law. Because of this translation, there is a great misunderstanding of what Torah truly means. Torah is not law. He's correct. And that's why I'm saying when we translate nomos, the Greek word nomos is being used by the Greek translators, should be used that way. So this goes back a long way. And real quick here, you'll say, well, Joe, the Holy Spirit chose to put the Greek word there, nomos, so it means law. Not so quick. There is a lot of modern scholarly work being done that suggests the bulk of your New Testament was actually written in Hebrew. In fact, the only thing that might have ever been written in Greek was Paul's letters to the Greek churches. Okay, so, and when you're reading Paul, like the book of Romans, he tells you nomos, the law of, but then he puts adjectives on it to qualify which law he's talking about. And even then, you have to be careful with what Torah originally meant. Words can morph over time and take on different meanings. And that's what we're looking at today. So Torah is not law. This is Benner again. When we use the word law, we assume a certain meaning and concept of the word that is not present in the Hebrew scriptures. It says, let us start by looking at the etymology of the Hebrew word Torah so that we may better understand its true definition. Etymology, its source, its evolution. The word Torah comes from a Hebrew root word, YRH, Strong's 3384. It's a verb, which means to flow or throw something. And Charlie, if Benner gets it wrong, chime in here and correct him, but I don't think he's going to here. Benner says this can be a flowing of an arrow from an archer's bow or the flowing of a finger to point out a direction. He says nouns are derived from the verb by making one or two changes to the verb root. For instance, and he's going to give you Hebrew letters here. The letter Yud is replaced by the letter Vav, and the letter Mem is added to the front of the word. And the noun is Morah, Strong's 4175. It's formed and means one who does the flowing. So you have the flow and the one who does the flowing. This can be an archer who flows an arrow or a teacher who flows his finger to point out the way a student is to go in the walk of life. Stop right there. Hopefully you are starting to understand the difference between the way the Hebrew thinks and the way the Greek mind. You and we've inherited the Greek world. Okay, the Greek way of thinking. Notice that this is verb orientated. The noun is the flow. The moreh, that's the one who does the flowing. Okay, that's a different way of thinking to us. And hopefully this is showing, because for me, Benner's on target here right now. He continues. Another noun from the root word is formed the same way, except that the letter Tav is placed at the front of the word instead of the letter Mem. And we have the word Torah. Torah is what is flowed by the Moreh. This can be the arrow from the archer or the teachings and instructions from the teacher. Charlie, pop on here for a minute real quick.
Yes.
Benner's doing okay here so far, isn't he?
So far, he's okay.
All right. Do you and I didn't ask Charlie about this. This is flat-footed. Do you agree with me when I say that it is important for us to at least understand how the Hebrew thinks, and that this is an excellent example of how the flow, the one who does the flowing, and the thing that is flowed all ties together in the Hebrew language?
Right. Yes. Yes.
This is a good example.
Yeah. This is good.
Folks, English is not capable of doing this. It takes many more words to explain the nuance and the character in English than it does here in the Hebrew. And it's just because of the way the language functions. So far, you're happy with Benner here. So far,
yes.
All right. Thank you, sir. He says the Hebraic definition of Torah is a set of instructions from a father to his children, or that's an example, from the father to his children. Violations of these instructions are disciplined in order to foster obedience and train his child. Notice how the word Torah is translated in the New International Version translation of the following passage. Y'all know I do not like the NIV. We'll get to this in just a second here. Proverbs 1:8. He says, listen, my son, to your father's instruction, and do not forsake your mother's teaching. The word is Torah. So what did I do? I went to Proverbs 1:8 in the NASB, and it says, listen, my son, to your father's instruction, and do not ignore your mother's teaching. I looked it up in the interlinear. It does say Torah right there for teaching. So my mother's teaching is Torah. That's the word there in the Hebrew. Proverbs 3:1, my son, do not forget my teaching, Torah in the Hebrew, but keep my commands in your heart. Torah means teaching, okay? That's how it should be translated almost all the time. The purpose of parents' Torah is to teach and bring the children to maturity, adulthood. If the Torah is violated out of disrespect or defiant disobedience, which we all, if you're a parent or you've got nieces and nephews or you've been around little kids, you know they do this, even especially teenagers. If the violated out of disrespect or defiant disobedience, the child is punished. If the child desires to follow the instructions out of a loving obedience but falls short of the expectations, the child is commended for the effort and counseled on how to perform the instruction better the next time. Unlike Torah, law is a set of rules from a government and binding on a community. Violation of the rules requires punishment. With this type of law, there is no room for teaching. Either the law was broken with the penalty of punishment, or it was not broken. God, as our heavenly Father, gives his children his Torah in the same manner as parents give their Torah to their children, not in the manner as a government does to its citizens. And then he has Psalm 94:12. Blessed is the man you discipline, O Yahweh, the man you teach from your Torah. So this is an important understanding that this is I used this one here, gave it to you in your homework, your show notes, because it teaches cultural understanding. Yes, he's going over definitions, but it teaches you the difference in the language and the difference in the culture, the difference in the way they think. All of these things tie together. So hopefully you're starting to understand that when you run into the Greek word nomos in your New Testament, and it's translated law, because that's what nomos means in Greek. It means law. That may not have been the word that should have been chosen when that passage was written, because Torah didn't take on the understanding of law until after Messiah died and ascended. At least that's what I'm understanding. Now, where did I get that from? All right, I'm going to share with you the next link I told you we're going to cover. This is also in your homework. This is what does Torah mean? This is by My Jewish Learning right here. Okay, so this is an Orthodox Jewish website. We're going to read parts of this. It's 3 pages long. I'm not going to read every word of it, but a good part of it. It says, when most people think of Torah, they likely think of the 5 books of Moses, also known as the Pentateuch. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. These 5 books together form the first and most sacred third of the Jewish Bible, the Tanakh. The Tanakh is the Jewish Old Testament. Okay, and you hear us use this word on the show all the time. In synagogues throughout the world, the Pentateuch, which is, if I'm not mistaken, that's the Greek word for the law, the books of Moses. They are written in a quill on a parchment scroll attached to a wooden rollers. This scroll, used for ritual purposes, is called the Sefer Torah and housed in the Holy Ark on the wall of the sanctuary that faces Jerusalem. Now, as a quick aside, this is why a lot of Hebrew roots movements retranslate scripture and call it a sefer. They think they're being closer to the original scriptures. Be careful with anything that claims to be a sefer. A lot of times they remove the divinity of the Messiah, and that is because the people doing that translating usually lacks sound scholarship, scholarly training, and they are usually going so far back in the other direction from the visible church. They're going back under the laws of Moses, which is Judaism, Judaizers. This is what Paul tells you to stay away from. In other words, they're going back to a law of works, and they will remove the divinity of Messiah as a result. So you be careful. I'm not telling you not to read it. I'm telling you, be very careful with anything that calls itself a sefer. Just because it sounds Hebrew doesn't mean that it's something you should trust. There's no magic in the Hebrew language, only understanding. So the Jewish learning site continues, but the word Torah has many other meanings as well. It refers not just to the 5 books of Moses, but also to all of the Tanakh. And it is sometimes used to refer also to the Talmud or other rabbinic writings known as the oral Torah. I reject those, mostly because the New Testament tells me to reject the oral traditions. Torah can also mean Jewish teachings writ large and in large. Okay, so I'm going to come back to this in a minute, but I want to show you what a passage in scripture that proves their point. Now, they're Jewish, so they're going to reject the Messiah. Yeshua is not Messiah. This is John 10:34. Yeshua answered them, "Has it not been written in your law, I said you are gods?" Now, in the Hebrew, it says, "I said you are Elohim." And this is Yeshua quoting Psalm 82. And he's talking to the Pharisees, the religious council, the head elders of Israel at the time. Well, he just called that law, nomos, in the Greek. Well, Psalm 82 isn't law. It isn't. It's a psalm. And it's not talking about law. It's talking about history and prophecy. Psalm 82, therefore, must be Torah. Is it not written in your Torah? Well, the psalm is not in the Pentateuch. So what's the logic here? The Messiah, I think he's authoritative, is telling you that the law includes psalms, and he's quoting that, and he calls that law. Well, that's not the way we should have translated it. And now, is this because the Gospel of John was originally written in Greek, and because of later understandings, later developments in the word Torah, it was translated. It was originally written in Hebrew and was translated into Greek using nomos, law, because of later understanding of the word. An example would be logos. John 1:1, in the beginning was the logos. Well, today that means word, not at the time that the Bible was written. When John wrote his gospel, that is not what that word would have meant to the Greeks. That would have meant the conscious mind of the creator, of the universal creator. That's how they would have understood it. So over time, words change, and especially if they've been translated. There's good reason to believe that a majority of all of your gospels were originally written in Hebrew, because there are some idioms and sayings that have been literally translated into Greek that make no sense in Greek. But if you understand that it's Greek words in place of the Hebrew thinking, then it makes a lot of sense. They just transliterated Hebrew idioms. So they've also found some of these passages written in Hebrew. There are a lot of documents that we've scooped up over the years that nobody's ever examined. They're starting to get access to the Vatican and other archival records, and they're finding these Gospels and other passages of the New Testament written in Hebrew that seem to be older than the Greek. So be careful with this, okay? Because this passage here and others, at the very least, tells us that the word nomos, meaning law in Greek, doesn't necessarily transvey the It doesn't give the right connotation. Teachings would have probably been a better word, a Greek word for teaching. So now we're back to my Jewish learning. This is what the word Torah means. The Hebrew word Torah literally means direction or instruction. The root Yad Resh He, or, going to go to the root word that we've already read about, originally likely meant to throw or shoot an arrow, something that flows. The noun Torah is rendered in a causative conjunction, which is just a way of saying that it literally means to cause something or someone to move straight and true. A Torah is therefore something that directs, having connotations of offering strong and virtuous guidance. Okay. That's a little different than what Mr. Benner said. Mr. Benner was explaining this not only with the etymology of the word, but also in the cultural understanding of the word. Our Jewish learning here is being a little more scholastic, a little more, leaving a little more room for doubt in just the definition of the word. Two different objectives.
They're more grammatically correct, though.
Yes, I understand that. I get that. But do you understand why? Come back here, Charlie. Do you understand why I used Benner's definition?
Yes, I do.
It taught cultural understanding.
Yes.
Well, our Jewish friends are going to worry more about the grammar and the technicality of Hebrew.
Right. Yes.
All right. I included both of these for those two different reasons, and I'm pointing them out. My Jewish learning continues. He says, beyond instruction or teaching, Torah can also mean law or statute, something one is not just guided to do, but required to do. And it can also refer to a custom, a kind of loose, unwritten law, like the rules of Fight Club are you don't talk about Fight Club. It's an unwritten law. This is both in antiquity and in today, the word Torah is used to refer to something quite small, such as a singular bit of instruction or teaching. Today, you might hear someone get up in front of a group to share words of Torah, which could possibly have no direct relation to the 5 books of Moses. Equally, Torah is used to refer to something much larger or more amorphous, even most or all of the Jewish teaching and practice, old and new. So it's a very broad, fungible word in modern usage. Now, here's what I really wanted you to see. How the 5 books of Moses came to be called Torah. Now, this is Jewish custom and tradition, Jewish culture, House of Judah, since the time of Messiah. The Torah itself, with a capital T, that is the 5 books of Moses, does not actually refer to itself by name. In fact, it does not refer to itself at all. Since there were originally separate books that were later gathered into a collection, traditionally in the time of Ezra, the word Torah does not appear throughout the 5 books where it clearly means instruction. For instance, in Exodus 24:12, it is essentially synonymous with mitzvah. Well, mitzvah is a Hebrew word for commandment. So in some cases, it can mean commandment. Can. The Lord said to Moses, "Come up to me on the mountain and wait there, and I will give you the stone tablets with the teachings, the Torah, and commandments, mitzvah, which I have inscribed to instruct them." Now, here's the problem with this. This shows you the Jewish bias. That's not Hebrew parallelism there. Teachings and commandments are 2 different words used in series. If it had been in parallelism, I will give you the stones with the teachings, with the Torah, and I will give you the tablets with my commandments. That would have been Hebrew parallelism. That's not how this is written. This is using 2 different words. I'll give you my teachings and my commandments. But our Jewish learning is reading it as both meaning law. You have to be careful with your source because our biases creep into things. So how do you know I'm interpreting this correctly? I'm triangulating. I'm looking at this from the Hebrew Roots Movement's perspective. I'm looking at this from a mainstream Christianity's perspective. I'm looking at this from the position of the Jews, modern day Orthodox Jewish culture and teaching. And I'm also looking at it from the logic that flows from Scripture itself. When I look at all 4, it tends to point me in the direction that I stand right now, where I'm sitting, what I'm trying to teach you. I am in a sense, teaching you my understanding at this time. I told you, it's my book report. So when I read this, I see two different things. Yahweh's going to give you his teachings and his commandments. But my Jewish learning just said they're the same thing in this book, in the book of Exodus and stuff. I disagree. There's a reason, this is what we did last week for. Yahweh doesn't need to give us 4 different words for one thing. He wouldn't do that. That causes confusion. My Jewish learning continues. In a great many cases, Torah refers to instructions that accompany a sacrifice or ritual. In these contexts, it is clear that it refers only to those specific instructions. To pick but one example is Leviticus 7:11. Now, that's what we call the cultic rituals, the cultic ordinances, where the teaching applies to a sacrifice or an offering. That's cultic. Or if the teaching applies to how the priests should act and how they're supposed to conduct themselves, that's a cultic thing. If it's about the temple, that's a cultic thing. It applies to the Levites. It applies to the temple. It applies to the sacrifices. Well, under the new covenant, Messiah is your sacrifice. You're under a different order of priesthood, et cetera, et cetera. You and I are the temple. Things changed. We'll get to that as we continue. Back to my Jewish learning. Let me finish and go up to Deuteronomy 1:5, and we'll take a break there, Charlie. The book of Deuteronomy, the 5th book of the Torah, is different. This book, which is primarily composed of speeches of Moses, understands itself as a repetition of instructions that Moses received from God and gave to the Israelites. If I'm not mistaken, Deuteronomy carries the connotation of repetition. I think that's what the word means, to repeat or say it again. This book refers to its contents as Torah, as teaching, right from the beginning. These are the words that Moses addressed to all Israelites on the other side of the Jordan. On the other side of the Jordan, in the land of Moab, Moses undertook to expound this teaching, this Torah, Deuteronomy 1:1 and 1:5. And in that sense, that's where you get the idea Torah from, because it says, okay, I'm going to tell you again. That's how the Pentateuch came to be thought of as law, the law of Moses. Although not everything in the first 5 books of the Bible is a mitzvah, a commandment, a law. And this is why a lot of modern day scholars are coming to understand the Old Testament as a book of Hebrew wisdom, much like the Code of Hammurabi. Wisdom books were very popular in the ancient Near East in ancient times. They were common to different people groups, cultures. This would be the Hebrew, not Jewish, Hebrew wisdom book. And that flows from the understanding that we're being explained right here, right now. It's just they're not making that point. They're trying to make a different point. But that flows. It's consistent. So we're going to take the break here, the bottom of the hour break. When we come back, we're going to continue with this. And then I'm going to show you a few other things that I want you to have in your head and understand before we move on to next week's class. 3 minutes, please, Charlie. Okay, we should be back now. We're going to, hopefully everybody's back in their pew, and we're just going to pick up where we left off. And I'll throw this back up here for us. This is from My Jewish Learning. And we left off where it says that the book of Deuteronomy calls itself the Torah of Moses, right from the start, the teachings of Moses. Showed us in Deuteronomy 1:1 and 1:5. It says, likewise, before presenting the Ten Commandments, Deuteronomy states, quote, this is the teaching, the Torah, that Moses set before the Israelites, unquote, Deuteronomy 4:44. In Deuteronomy, Torah is not just law, but a written legal teaching. But within Deuteronomy and elsewhere in the Bible, there are references to this law being written down and preserved. Moses inscribes the teachings he is imparting in stone, Deuteronomy 27:3, and makes a copy for the priests, Deuteronomy 31:9. Joshua later inscribes a copy of Moses' teaching on the stones for the Israelites for their benefit, Joshua 8:32. Now, this is probably more than just the Ten Commandments, because it says, write this whole law down on the stone, and we're told that he whitewashed the stone and wrote it down. It's probably the book of Deuteronomy, okay? That's probably what, we don't know for sure, but that's probably what it was. There was a time I thought it was the whole Pentateuch. Well, that's not going to fit on most stones. You're going to need a big old boulder for that sucker. And just like I used to think, okay, they had to, once every 7 years, a king has to read the law. So that's everybody has to sit out there and listen to the whole Pentateuch. You're not going to get kids to sit out there all day long back then or nowadays, no matter how strict the culture was. But if it actually meant just read the book of Deuteronomy, well, now that's a little more doable. That's only going to take you a couple hours. I see that. I get it. So this is just things for us to keep in mind and be aware of. This article concludes, later biblical authors refer frequently to Torat Moshe, the teachings of Moses. See, for example, Joshua 8:31. In some cases, this may mean specifically Deuteronomy. For example, in the story of King Hosea's discovery of a long-lost scroll of the law, 2 Kings 22, verse 11. In other cases, it is more likely refers to all 5 books of Moses, Nehemiah 8:1. They said more likely. They're being cautious here. Here's the whole point of this entire article, the point I wanted you to focus on. It wasn't until the post-biblical period that the 5 books of Moses, by then known as the Torah of Moses, became known simply as the Torah. And it wasn't until that period, this is after they're expelled from Jerusalem, after the temple is destroyed, post-biblical. It wasn't until that time that it started to become known as simply the Torah or the law. So this is a more recent development in history in the grander scheme of things. And this is how, over time, the teachings and traditions of man can creep into our translation of the scriptures and cause subtle changes and twisting that do affect sound doctrine. Not can, will. It's also one of the reasons that our brothers and sisters in the house of Judah have turned the Torah of Moses into an idol, and they have turned the oral traditions into something that has control over the revealed word of Yahweh. So that's an apostasy. It's a heresy that leads to an apostasy. They've created a religion that looks like it's biblical, but has no foundation in biblical teaching. The same applies to Christianity. The visible church has created, through the traditions and teachings of man, a religion that has the appearance of being Christian, the disciples of Messiah, but isn't. It is a 2-horned beast, 2 horns like a lambkin, looks like the lamb, the Messiah, but speaks as the dragon. Yeah, I know a lot of Christians don't want to hear that. You're okay if I say that about the Jews, but you don't want to hear that about Christianity. The Jews are okay if I say that about Christians. They're like, yeah, right, you're worshiping this man. He's not the Messiah. They don't want to hear that they've gone wrong too, even though the Messiah told them to their faces they had gone wrong. Exactly what I'm doing here. We added, taken away from, and twisted the original teachings of Moses. Well, there's something else going on here. It's going to be very important to next week's class. The law, the mitzvah, the commandments, what we would think of in our modern day and age as law, are connected to the covenants. The covenant that you're under. Well, the Israelites in the time of Moses were under two different covenants. Well, no, Joe, they were just under the covenant made at Sinai. No, they were already under a prior covenant, the covenant made with Abraham. That's important to understand. We'll start getting that next week. I don't want to confuse you too quickly. But the laws, the requirements are usually pegged to the covenant. And that's everything. That means everything. Now, if you'll go to your homework, you're also going to find there's another, this is What is Torah? This is from Chabad. It's going to be more traditional teaching of Orthodox Jewish understanding, because that's exactly what they're teaching. But it's going to mention a few things I want you to be aware of in case you haven't already. The Noahide laws. There are 7 Noahide laws. What the heck is a Noah? Well, this is the Torah, the teachings for Noah. This is what, in the time of the Israelite nation, when, the nation that Moses and Joshua established, Yahweh established through Moses and Joshua, the physical nation with the theocratic rule set up by Moses, Yahweh through Moses, they would refer to the Noahide laws as those laws that Gentiles must obey. So this applied to Gentiles. These are the teachings that must apply to Gentiles. We're going to read these real quick. The 7 Noahide laws are rules that all must keep, everybody, regardless of where you are, from where you come. Without these 7 things, it would be impossible for humanity to live together in harmony. So this is a universal moral law, which happens to go hand in hand with what we're doing on Tuesdays right now. This is from a Jewish learning site right here. This article comes from a Jewish learning site. How do I know? Well, it's G_D's oneness in any way. Do not profane Yahweh's oneness in any way. Acknowledge that there is one single Elohim who cares about what we are doing and desires that we take care of his world, his creation. Do not curse your creator. No matter how angry you may be, do not take it out on verbally against your creator. Now, this is a modern understanding. The commandment is do not let your creator's name come to naught. Do not take it as nothing. Do not bring shame or dishonor on your creator, not just curse him. Then remember, these laws apply to everybody. Do not murder. The value of human life cannot be measured. To destroy a single human life is to destroy the entire world, because for that person, the world has ceased to exist. It follows that by sustaining a single human life, you are sustaining an entire universe. That's a very Hebrew way of thinking. And if you saw yesterday's show, that's also where I got the idea that your claim to your will is an infinite claim. It's the entire world. It's unlimited. It cannot be measured. Many truths, many paths to one truth, one capital T truth. Number 4, do not eat a limb of a still living animal. Respect the life. In other words, respect the life of all of Yahweh's creatures. As intelligent beings, we have a duty not to cause undue pain to other creatures. Why would somebody eat the limb of a living creature? Well, if you got a flock and food is scarce, the sheep can all live with 3 legs. So you just chop off one of the legs from the sheep. The sheep lives, you still get the wool and whatever else, or the goats, you get the milk and the cheese and everything else. And now you get meat to eat. Things like that. It says, do not steal. Whatever benefits you receive in this world, make sure that none of them are at the unfair expense of someone else. It's not welfare if the state takes from one and gives to another. That's just theft by proxy. So this rule would apply to all humanity. It's a Noahide law. It's a law under Noah before the establishment of the covenant with Abraham or Moses. Harness and channel the human libido. Incest, adultery, and homosexual relations are forbidden. The family unit is the foundation of human society. Sexuality is the fountain of life, and so nothing is more holy than the sexual act. So too, when abused, nothing can be more debasing and destructive to the human being. So that is something that's supposed to apply to all people. Finally, establish courts of law and ensure justice in our world. With every small act of justice, we are restoring harmony to our world, synchronizing it with supernatural order. That is why we must keep the laws established by our government for the country's stability and harmony. So it's not just a law under Moses that you treat the foreigner alike with the native born Hebrew, which means that if the law says you come into this country legally or out you go, that's what the law says, whether you're a Hebrew or a Gentile. This is Hebrew thinking, though. It says, why are the Noahide laws especially important today? You can read through that if you'd like. We don't have to go through all of it. Then here's the other one that everybody thinks of, the 613 commandments, mitzvot. Well, let's just stop right here. Skip the Talmud. This is another Jewish site. I don't care about the Talmud. That's the oral law. To me, it's heretical. It's not. It's man trying to lay claim to Yahweh's word. But what I did here is I put this in here for you specifically because it lists all 613. Here's the point I want to make. These are not all called mitzvah. They're not all called commandments. Some of them are, going back to the other words we covered last week, some of them are rules, some regulations. Some of them are decrees, ordinances. They're not all mitzvot. Yahweh has different words for different things, for different reasons, for a purpose. He has a purpose behind using these words. And his prophets, especially in the first 5 books, the Pentateuch, tend to use these words consistently. Moses, whoever wrote the book, they use these words consistently. Well, that tells me that those words are being used for a reason. I do not have authority to just lump them all under mitzvot. If there were different words, and this is a regulation or this is an ordinance, and now all of a sudden I'm going to call them mitzvot, I'm changing the word of Yahweh. And if I'm dealing with the writings of Moses, Charlie, what did Moses say about adding to or taking away from what he taught us?
Not supposed to do that.
And what did the Messiah accuse the Pharisees of doing?
Doing just that.
Okay. So this is why I put these here for you. Hold on, Charlie. I got more for you. So if 613 is too much for you under the new covenant, how about the 1050 New Testament commandments? Where in the New Testament they are thou shalt nots, and I command yous.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
What? Yeah. These are commandments, or expressed as commandments, and they're all different. This is just the summary. This is just the summary. You want to see them? Here they are. 67 pages. 67 pages with the verse and what it teaches and tells you to do and not do. That's going to be a little bit of something that we have to obey, huh, Charlie?
Just a little bit, maybe.
I thought that the law was done away with under the new covenant. So what is this 1050 commandments got to do with anything?
You might want to go back and read that book again.
Thank you. Okay, folks, here's the point of why I put that 1050 commandments in there. A lot of them are pastoral letter teachings. They are instruction for how to obey the spirit of the law. There are only 2 laws ultimately. Love Yahweh with all your heart and all your might. All of those laws, mitzvah, that flow from that, the first few commandments in the 10 commandments, those are all about loving and respecting Yahweh. And then the other one, love your neighbor as yourself. So from however you want to number it, from the 5th or 6th commandment, to remember not to allow dishonor to come to your mother and father, from that forward, that all flows from loving your neighbor. But those are the 2 commandments. Everything else flows from those. So what's with all of these commandments about not lusting and not doing this and not doing that? Well, you can extrapolate those simply from the commandments to love God and love your creator and love your neighbor as yourself. It's what we're doing on Tuesday. Well, Joe, you can't get to, homosexuality is an abomination and a sin from loving God. I can't. He created us male and female. He said, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth, and subdue it. bring order to it. And in the process, he gave us the family unit, which is a covenant. Marriage is a covenant, the marriage covenant. We're going to cover that next week. Covenants, we're going to cover their importance. It's crucial. It's everything. So if I'm going to marry man and man, well, that's not the covenant. That's not a marriage covenant. Marriage is one man, one female, and you become one flesh. For the purpose of what? Making children. That was the commandment. Be fruitful, multiply, and to subdue the world, to work together. The woman is the helpmate of the husband, and they become a miniature mirror of Yahweh's kingdom, his church, his people, with the husband being the head over the woman, as the Messiah is the head over the body, as the Father is the head over the kingdom. These are mirrors. These are illustrations, examples. So if that's the commandment, I just flowed into thou shalt not have homosexuality. It was easy to extrapolate if you've bent your knee to those two commandments. Love your God, love your neighbor. And you also have to understand that you have to be intellectually honest to that. If you're not, then you're not loving God. Again, this is tied to the show we're doing on Tuesdays. I didn't plan it this way, but it's working out just fine. So what's the point, Joe? Well, a lot of those things that you see as a law are just teachings. They're teachings for how to keep, oh my God, it's a wisdom book for how to keep the spirit of the law. Well, nobody mentions spirit of the law, don't they? Does the Messiah not say and agree that there are weightier matters of the law? Some things that are more important than others? Yep. Does he not mention, is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath? Folks, you're now smack dab into the middle of a spiritual matter, spiritual essence of the law discussion. He's now talking about the spirit of the law, the purpose, the aim, the goal, the Torah. What is the teaching? Okay, the Father gives you the teaching, the Torah, the flow. That's the target. And then he's the one who gives the teaching that teaches you how to walk the straight and narrow path, or his son, the Messiah. Don't think that I've come to destroy the flow, but to restore it, to establish it, to fulfill it, to show you how to walk it. I'm the one giving you. I've come to show you how to do it. It's the arrow. It's an archery term. And to sin is to miss the mark. You didn't flow straight. You didn't follow the instructions. It's a wisdom book. The Old Testament, a Hebrew wisdom book. The New Testament is the wisdom book for Yahweh's people. All of his people. Hebrew with the grafted in Gentiles. And it's a covenant. Y'all do know that testament is just a Latin word for covenant, right? You know this? Or at least it comes from the Latin word for covenant. That's where we get it from. We think, well, last will and testament, it's your witness. No, it's your last will and covenant. It's a covenant with your family. It's an inheritance covenant. Yeah, it's called a sandal covenant in the biblical way of doing things. Whoopsie. Firstborn son inherit. Oh my gosh, this is all covenant stuff, isn't it? Duh. I didn't know that for a long time. And even once I'd learned it, I didn't realize how important it was or how it all related to each other until I started doing this study. And then it was like it's something I always knew, and just whap, like a thunderbolt from out of the blue. There's the essence of the new covenant, the one promised in Jeremiah. And that held all the answers for me. Now I understand what I'm accountable for under the new covenant and how I'm to account for it. And I don't need all the thou shalts and thou shalt nots, because I can do this all on my own. If I understand what I'm responsible for, and I'm faithful to him and his teaching, I don't need Paul telling me how to live this in every example I might encounter. I now understand the spirit of the law, why it was given, what its purpose is, how it's meant to guide my behavior, and I can apply it myself in every situation I might find myself in. And when I'm done, I'll go back and lo and behold, I'll probably find out that what I did falls generally in line with some of the teachings of the apostles and prophets in the Bible, or even the Messiah. Why? Many paths, one capital T truth. Once you understand the capital T truth, it's easy to follow that straight and narrow path. You won't want to. That's the sin dwelling in your flesh. That's the animalistic side of you that you have to tame, but you'll know how to do it. Black and white are easy. Right and wrong. Morality, right and wrong, following Yahweh's rules are easy. Following them, obeying them, keeping to them faithfully every time. That's where it gets hard, because there's a price to be paid for doing this. Generally, people are going to hate us. They're going to want to cancel us, or they're going to break up with us, or they're going to unfollow us, or blah, 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 blah. Oh my God. That's a small price to be paid compared to the price that the Messiah paid for us. But, a lot of us were weak, and I'm including myself in this. I don't care if I'm isolated. That doesn't bother me. I don't care if you don't like me. I'm made. That doesn't bother me. There are other things that bother me. When I see people who I know should know better, they've been told better, they've been taught better, and I don't necessarily mean by me, and they're just, they won't bow their knee to the truth. That affects me. That affects me the way that some teenage girl who all of a sudden her 500 followers just unfollow her one day, or better yet, she loses her whole phone. That's the same effect to me. It crushes my spirit, my soul. I don't get it. I don't understand. So yeah, I pay a price for this too, just like the Messiah said we would. If we're going to follow him, we're all going to pay a personal price. And it will probably be in our relationships with the people we love and care about most. But it might also cost us our life, our freedom. We might get arrested. We might lose our job. We might be executed or martyred. It's going to happen. That's tribulation in this world. In this world, you will have tribulation. Thlipsis, the Greek word. The Messiah's words, not mine. This is the whole idea of Torah, the law. This is what we have to have underneath our belts, and firmly understood in our mind. Not perfectly, firmly. Torah means teaching. Mitzvah means commandment. There are other things, regulations and ordinances mean laws. This is the type of thing that should be in our head. So when I run into law in the new covenant, I'm like, okay, does it mean mitzvah? Does it mean ordinance or regulation? Or does it mean Torah, teaching? And how does that, what's the context? And how does that affect the way I understand it if I give it a different meaning? Because if I give it a different meaning, isn't it written in your law that ye are gods? Well, it's not written anywhere in the Torah. So I guess the Messiah was misquoting something. Or isn't it written in your teachings? Oh, well, then that's the Tanakh. Yeah, that's Psalm 8. Oh, yeah. Okay. I see that there, Messiah, Yeshua. Changes what we think, how we think, and how we respond in relation. Now, next week is the important part. We're going to start understanding covenants. I'm going to teach you about the different type and their different components of those different type of covenants. We've done this once before. I'm going to do it in more detail, very much by the numbers. And the week after that, 2 weeks from now, we're going to talk about covenant theology versus dispensational theology. I used to believe, and I used to accept the claim that neither one of them is necessarily heretical. I'm starting to question that. I'm starting to think that dispensationalism, or at least the natural outcome of dispensational thinking, the flow, where you end up with, it's definitely heretical. And I'll explain all of that in 2 weeks. And then in 3 weeks, we'll put it all together, look at the new covenant, and we'll discuss and explain my understanding of what's required of us under the new covenant, how it works, where we find all the different pieces of it, how we put it all together. Hold on, folks. We got a prayer request on the board. We're going to read this. It's from Marianne Boatwright. It says, say a prayer for me. I have a lunch interview with the governor's office. They approached me. Not sure I want to get that close to politics. Need help with decision making. Well, you got to go to the meeting. We'll keep you in prayer today and tomorrow until you tell us you've made your decision, but you at least need to see what they want. It might have something to do with the fact that they might trust you. I know you well enough to know that you're trustworthy. I've known you for a long time, Miss Boatwright. Could be that finally you're being recognized for your worth and value, because I've known you long enough to know you sell yourself very, very short in that regard, and you shouldn't. Don't get prideful about it. That comes from a recovering narcissist, but you're more valuable and worth more than what you've ever given yourself credit for. That I can tell you, and I have no qualms or reservations about saying that to you, even publicly. So hopefully this is a good thing. If nothing else, you'll have to email Charlie and I and let us know how that goes so that we know how to pray for you. All right, Charlie, we got anything to add before we wrap this one today?
No, not yet. I'm excited for next week. I want to see how all this comes together and stuff. And I'm looking for. I'm probably gonna go behind you and do a little bit of fact checking on this one myself. So
your links for next week's show will start going up on the homework over the next couple of days. I should have them all up by the Sabbath.
Yep,
it'll take me a little while. Charlie asked me today, where am I getting all my references from? I'm going to give you the ones that are most accessible for you. Okay. Because I don't expect all of you to have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's about 13 books up here on the culture of the ancient Near East. Some of them are what we would call Christian. Some of them are what we would call strictly scholarly. I don't expect you to have them, since none of them is less than $35. And I've been acquiring them over years. I don't expect you to have that. I don't expect you to have gone through them. Most of them will make your eyeballs bleed from dryness. You're like, oh my God.
Yeah.
I like that crap. I'm broken. Y'all aren't. But all of that studying I've done, I found one website that y'all are used to, Bible Hub, that like, hey, they condensed all that crap into these 2 or 3 pages pretty easy. So I'll give you some of the books, but I'm also going to give you a few of the sites that get it right. And I'll link you to 3 books that you might want to read if you're really interested in this, that are fairly affordable, but they're old. I told you my teachers are dead. It's all going to come from Trumbull. He died 100 and something years ago, but he is the gold standard for biblical covenant theology. He's the one that did all the homework on this. So I'll gift you all of that information up, and I'll have a few PDFs where I put it into a format that you can download, and it won't disappear or change on you as long as you got it saved somewhere. Does that work for you, Charlie?
Yep. Good.
You'll have time to go behind me before the class starts. And remember, Wonderful. It's going to take us at least 2 weeks to get through all of this.
Oh, yeah.
So it's by the numbers. So I'm intentionally being stupid simple. All right. We thank you for being here. We appreciate you. We love you. We hope that we're able to serve you, that we edify you, as in help you with your understanding of your scriptures in a way that you can actually apply to your own scripture study, into your own life, and the way you walk your faith. If there's anything that we're doing that you find of value, please hit the like buttons. If you're on YouTube, smash the bell. Share the show with whoever you think might benefit from it. Feel free to describe me in any way, shape, or form you'd like. We know that I'm an acquired taste. It's not just a shtick that we say. We mean it. We just try to make fun of it. Other than that, if you have questions, concerns, or anything like that, we welcome your email. I'm fairly caught up. I got a few I need to answer, but that's mostly just personal friendship type emails that those people know I'm a little slow. They're used to that. But I will get back to them. I don't ignore my friends for too long. Otherwise, they might think I'm dead. Well, that might actually be a blessing for some of them. They won't have to call me friend no more. Anyway, so until tomorrow. Oh, yeah, tomorrow. For those of you that are interested, we're going to talk about Bigfoot. Just T-Rex. I'll send you an email later. And then Friday, we're going to be on the next 2 chapters of Dr. Heiser's book. So that's what's in store for the rest of the week. Until then, we'll see you all later. Y'all stay safe. Take care of yourself until we meet again. Bye-bye.